This is Austin Liti Limits, where authors talk to authors about books and the craft of storytelling. Sponsored by Blue Ink Review, because typing the end is just the beginning. Find out more at blueinkreview.com. Frank Luna is a sci-fi novelist fresh off a career as an Emmy Award-winning television director-producer with 40 years' experience in TV production and broadcast news. His father instilled a love of the universe and appreciation for the impact that science has had on civilization. Frank carried that passion into his first novel, Red Storm, about a human colony on Mars. And the sequel, The Community, continues the story with how a shadowy syndicate on Earth tries to destroy the colony. In this segment, he talks with Austin Liti Limits about the art of researching and writing science fiction. So we're going to welcome to Austin Liti Limits today, Frank Luna, who is the author of The Community. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Larry. How's it going? Good to talk to you.
Oh, it's good to be talked to. I wanted to ask you, probably the best place for any author is to say, have you always wanted to write fiction? Like from when you were a little boy on up?
Oh, well, I was always had a imagination, always making up stories in my head, but I actually really didn't sit down and seriously start writing till my 40s. But I had these things rolling around in my head. I would make drawings of cities and characters. When I was a little kid, I had books of that stuff, but I really didn't put it out onto paper until my 40s, actually. Kind of my midlife crisis, I decided to write a book. So instead of buy a sports car.
I know my first effort was when I was 14, and it was a total ripoff of the Hardy Boys. I mean, almost word for word.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I will say that when I went to parochial school, and you always did essays and stuff. And one of the nuns in the fifth grade class said, "Frank, you should really work on your writing. You could be, write a book someday." So, and yeah, that's the best thing the Catholic Church did for me. So I guess.
Got you going anyway.
Oh yeah, it got me thinking.
Yeah. So why Mars? Because your first book came out like 10 years ago or something like that, Red Storm. Yeah. And that was about a base that was on Mars. So
right.
what's the fascination there?
Well, I've always been fascinated with the space program. My dad he worked in the early space program, actually the early missile program. He used to work on the Minuteman missile. They sent them all over the country. So he was always into space, and he used to get me up in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, this is California time, to watch the launches of Alan Shepard and John Glenn. And so that got me an early interest in the space program, and then religiously have followed it throughout the years. But Mars, I think reading Ray Bradbury's Martian Chronicles when I was 13, 14 years old, that hooked me on the whole subject of Mars. I was stunned that someone could write a story about people on Mars. I don't know why that never occurred to me. And so that always stayed in my head. And it took a few more decades, but that's when I sat down and formulated the story for Red Storm.
I think I read something just very recently that said scientists have found some sort of water on Mars now, and which indicates the possibility of life.
Absolutely. Well, if you can find water on Mars, then that can turn into oxygen and fuel for spacecraft that come there. So they don't have to carry all their fuel from Earth. They can manufacture it on Mars. So yeah, that's a huge a discovery. They've always known that there is a high amount of a brine type of liquid on Mars, usually subterranean. Some even at the ice caps. the polar ice caps. But to be able to drill for it, that would be a real sea change in trying to settle Mars.
Sure, sure. So
Mhm.
you wrote Red Storm,
Right.
what, 10, 11 years ago?
10, 11 years ago. Yeah, I had always been fascinated again with Mars. And one day I was thinking about, gee, what if you got a whole crew of people on Mars and suddenly a solar storm hits the Earth and they lose complete contact with Earth? And so that's kind of where the story began with me because we're all talking about solar maximums and all these ejecta coming from the sun and hitting Earth. I said, well, what if you have a crew on Mars and they lose contact with Earth? So that was kind of the premise for the story. And then I took it one step forward and said, well, what if the rescue crew from Earth is already en route and they land on Mars and try to save the crew, but there's nobody on the spacecraft. So the spacecraft is empty. So that was kind of the drive. That's kind of the drive that got me going on writing the story. So
Yeah. And then of course that plays into the
into
community,
the community.
which is
Well, right.
which is out now,
Mhm.
the newest one. And I guess the question I have to ask, why did it take 11 years between one and the other?
Well, here's the
Are
real
you that much
shocker.
of a sloth?
Well, I am the sloth rider, yes. I think I wrote Red Storm actually at the end of the 19th century. So I think it was 1999 is when I finished it. But I didn't publish Red Storm until 2012. So I'm a slow worker. And I really didn't know what I had when I finished Red Storm until I got into a readers group and they ripped it apart for me and we rebuilt it and put it back together. And then they said, hey, this is really a pretty good story. Go ahead and see if you can get it professionally edited and published. So, but during that time, when I'd finished Red Storm, I was formulating the community, which is what's happening on Earth while these people are stranded on Mars. And so that has been bouncing around in my head, Larry, for 20 years. And a lot of the scenes in community I wrote 20 years ago in my head. So now you're asking why did I publish Red Storm in 2012 and waited till 2024 to write the community or publish it? And you know what? Work gets in the way sometimes. And I just couldn't sit down and get everything together. It finally all came together a few years ago. And so I said, there's no excuse, sit down and write it. So it took me about 18 months, but I'm pretty happy with the result.
Well, the community is basically about a group, a nefarious group trying to stop the whole development on Mars.
Hmm.
And it's fascinating because almost all of that story takes place on Earth and how
Correct.
all of that works out.
Hmm. Right.
So, so did you pattern any of the characters in the community after some of the billionaires that we know
Oh,
about?
yeah. Yes, I think you could see the similarities there now. You know, in the beginning, Bill Gates and Jobs and all the, they were kind of running the tech at the time. And then, of course, over the years, that's kind of changed. So it's kind of a fusion of different personalities. I didn't steal from anybody as far as their actual what they do, but yes, I did fashion um, the people in Red Storm after pretty much what's going on in real life. I mean, I think you got to write about what's happening right in front of you. So,
Yeah. And of course, it helps living so close to Silicon Valley,
right, right,
all of the influence that we have going on there. And since I grew up out there,
sure,
the references to Moffett Field, the air base
right.
is no longer an air base.
Hmm.
Um, uh,
Yes, I worked out there too, and so I used to drive through that area where Moffett Field is, where Sunnyvale. So very familiar with that area. Almost worked in the high tech field back then, but I ended up in broadcast news. But so yes, I was very familiar with just the whole terrain and the whole texture of the Silicon Valley. So the book basically starts there and circles around and ends up there again. So yes.
yeah. What advice would you have for writers who are captivated by a certain element, whether it's science fiction or
Mhm.
romance or something like that. And but they can't get off their back ends to actually sit down and write. What would you tell them?
Oh boy. Well, for me, if they're captivated either with a space program or with high tech, with accounting, whatever, I think you just have to kind of whirl around stories in your head. I mean, that's why I came up with Red Storm. At first it was just an innocent crew on Mars, and then what about if something happens to Earth? And so that's kind of where I built the story. I do think what helped me in my process is it's a story. It's what I say to everybody when they're coming up and talk to me about Red Storm. I say it's about a crew of 8 people building a base on Mars. They lose contact with Earth. They're waiting for the relief crew to come rescue them. But when that spacecraft arrives, it's empty. And so that right there was a mantra I used when I was writing. And so that drove me forward. And of course, a lot more happens in Red Storm than just the spacecraft is empty. And as you see, that unfolds not only into what's going on Mars, but with the community on Earth.
On
And
Earth?
so, yeah, those stories that you had to kind of weave them together. And in the community, I do weave stories of Red Storm throughout the community. They're very short little snippets, but it just kind of gives you a reminder that things are taking place on 2 different planets.
Yeah. The books that I've published have been kind of all over the map. I started, I was still working in the TV news business when I
Mm-hmm.
wrote Live at Five. And
Mm-hmm.
it's
I
basically,
enjoyed very much.
yeah, basically just a satire of the business. And then I've had two historical fiction books. And then I have one rom-com, a romance novel. And one of our other colleagues here on Awesome Lady Limits and I were talking about how when I wrote that, it was not a romance novel. And it was
Uh-huh.
not going to be a romance novel. I'm sorry. I don't care what you
Mhm.
say. This is not a romance novel. And he made me a bet. So we submitted it to the Independent Book Publishers Awards under the romance category. And son of a gun, if it didn't win.
Oh my God.
Well, now every time I see him, oh yeah, you're the romance writer. I'm like,
Yes.
I
Oh
didn't.
my God. What's funny about that is that a lot of people tell me that with Red Storm particularly, that it's not really sci-fi, it's mystery thriller. So
Yeah,
I've actually thought about submitting that as mystery thriller also because it's just the texture, the landscape is Mars, but it's actually the mystery thriller going on in the story. So that's kind of funny that romance novelist Larry Brill. Okay.
oh. I did a little bit of research though. There are actually more men writing romance than you would imagine. It's
Oh,
not just all women writing for women.
okay.
Although that was my mindset going, you know,
Mm. Well,
uh,
I'm not judging, so okay.
oh, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So is there going to be, I mean, if the community was born out of Red Storm, is there going to be a third book?
Again, Larry, that story is bouncing around in my head. I have a couple of different avenues I'm looking at proceeding, but as a writer, this is kind of the exciting part is making it up in your head first. Sometimes the writing part of it is the drudgery, because before you put it down on paper, you let your mind just go wild. So right now I'm formulating something, but I hope it doesn't take another 10 years to publish it.
I hope it doesn't take another 10 years either, because, I've got a space right over there on my bookshelf waiting for you.
Oh my, pressure's on.
Yeah, the pressure is on. Okay, let's get to our lightning round, uh,
Okay,
which is something that we stole from the actors inside the actor studio, and they stole
right.
it from Marcel Proust, who stole it from, I don't know, Moses or somebody like that. It's 10 specific questions.
Okay.
And
Well, what is the parting gift? That's what I'd like to know. So.
there you go. All right. So, first question. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word. Uh, you know, A word I've been using a lot lately, and it's on the golf course, believe it or not, is the word tactician. And that
Tactician.
tactician, yes, and that comes from seeing my fellow players or myself just coming up with some excellent shot that pushes you right into the hole, and so I've often said, "Boy, you're quite the tactician." So I don't know why, but I've been using that word lately. So I'll go with tactician.
Okay. Then what is your least favorite word?
Oh, least favorite word. Oh boy, double bogey.
I get that.
Okay, how's that?
That sounds like a good one.
Okay,
What what turns you on?
turns me on. Okay, my wife and I just finished. We just got back from Europe recently, from Amsterdam and Germany. And I got to tell you, the one thing that turns me on is I love going to a place I've never been before, whether that's driving down the highway or visiting a town or a country. Uh, it makes you feel young again. So I just love doing that.
Well, we all need to feel young again.
Oh, that's for sure.
Got the gray hair going and all that.
Hmm.
So then, what turns you off?
What turns me off? That's betrayal. I think, in fact, I write about it in both my books. There's betrayal going through both. So, yeah, I would say that is a theme, and that definitely is a big turnoff to me.
Okay. What is your idea of happiness?
Oh my God, happiness. Saturday cocktails with my wife. That's something that when we were both working full time and we had these, horrid schedules, we'd finally on Saturday at 4 o'clock sit down and have our martini. And for some reason, that is my happy place. And even now, since we've both retired, that's my happy place. So don't call me at Saturday at 4 o'clock because my drink will get warm. So,
Okay. I promise I will not do that.
okay.
Who is your favorite author?
Oh, my favorite author. Oh my God. Well, obviously Ray Bradbury, Arthur C. Clarke. The one I probably read and dip into reading from time to time is Mark Twain. I love Mark Twain. I mean, he's a man way ahead of his time, even more than H.G. Wells, who was amazing. But Mark Twain he wrote about the human condition. And he had just beautiful prose. I mean, unusual prose, but beautiful prose. So I would I'd have to say Mark Twain. I mean, I have a big old book here and I dip into it every once in a while.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites too. I think in many ways he changed the course of literature.
Oh, I don't, yeah, no doubt. Yes.
Although I think Hemingway did the same thing when he started writing short sentences,
Mhm.
So that was
And a few people know that Mark Twain actually assisted Ulysses S. Grant in writing his memoir, which he urged him for years and years to do that. And so Mark Twain assisted with him on that.
if you could be a character from any novel throughout the course of history, who would you want to be?
Fictional or does it matter?
Well, fictional, but
Yeah. Oh, well, I always think of the Lord of the Rings and Frodo. He here was a little hobbit, uh, given a ring, and it changed his life. He saw places he'd never been before. He met wizards and elves and dwarfs and kings. He was put in harm's way, but that little guy was able to persevere just because of the big heart he had. So I think Frodo, I would love that.
that's a great choice. Really
Hmm.
is. Well, you're retired now,
Hmm.
but if you could be any profession, an expert in any profession,
Hmm.
what would you want to do?
Um, well, it's kind of related to my field, but when as I was a director, as you know, so I was always behind the scenes. But
I
I
know
also
I was in front of the scene.
Well, that's right. And so, but I always admired your writing and everything. But, when I was blogging, I blogged for CBS Sacramento. And I worked the U.S. Open when it was in town here, the senior U.S. Open, and I worked in the press room. And I loved doing the blogs out of the press room and following the athletes around and telling their stories. So, in a way, if I hadn't been a director, I think I should have been a sports columnist. I would have loved doing that.
Yeah. When I graduated from college, originally, I thought I was going to be the sports guy. And
Hmm.
turned out I wound up going into news and never looked back.
Oh, but
So,
you were
but
a great newsman, though.
always close to my heart, though,
Yeah.
the sports thing.
Yeah,
So,
well, I got to tell you the story of meeting you on the golf. We used to play golf together in Reading, and I was fairly new to the business. And I remember we were on the third hole of a little dinky course, and you saw a little puff of smoke in the distance. This was before the huge wildfires that we have now. And you left the golf course. You said, I have to go see what this is, and I'm like, what? So that's the day I decided I was going to be behind the camera and not a newsman like you. You were dedicated, my friend.
yeah, that was the reporter in me. What can I say?
Uh-huh.
What profession would you least like to do that you really wouldn't want to do?
Oh, that's easy. I wouldn't want to be an accountant.
We
You
get that a
know,
lot.
oh, really? Yeah, I took accounting in college and I barely got through. Yeah, you know what? My brain's not wired that way.
Yeah, I understand that. All right, our final question. If heaven exists, what would you like God to say to you when you get to the check-in desk?
Uh, I think I'd like to hear that I appreciated the world he created, the wonders in the world, the mountains, the oceans, the trees, that I took it all in while I was on this beautiful blue marble that we are living on.
Good deal. Good deal. All right, Frank Luna, his latest book is The Community.
Yes.
Oh, I just bopped my microphone.
Uh-oh. But don't forget Red Storm too. Oh, there it is.
Red Storm. Those two books obviously go together, and
Mhm.
I recommend them. They're both really well done. Good job.
I appreciate it.
All right. Frank Luna, thank you very much for being with us today.
And thanks, Larry. Thanks for having me.
This has been a presentation of Austin Liti Limits, made possible with help from our good friends at Blue Ink Review, where typing "the end" is just the beginning. Find out more at blueinkreview.com.